Chapter 1: The Fallen Detective. The fog hung heavy over the cobblestone streets of Victorian London, a shroud of mystery that clung to the city like a second skin. In the heart of this labyrinthine metropolis, nestled among the towering spires and sprawling mansions, stood a man whose name had become synonymous with brilliance, eccentricity, and an unparalleled mastery of deductive reasoning: Sherlock Holmes. For years, Sherlock had been the city's most celebrated detective, a figure of almost mythical proportions whose keen intellect and dogged determination had allowed him to unravel even the most baffling of cases. His exploits had become the stuff of legend, whispered about in the darkened corners of taverns and parlors alike, and his name had become a byword for justice and truth. At his side, as always, was his loyal friend and chronicler, Dr. John Watson. The two men had forged an unbreakable bond over the years, a partnership built on mutual respect, unwavering loyalty, and a shared passion for the pursuit of knowledge. Together they had faced countless dangers and emerged triumphant, their friendship a beacon of light in a world too often shrouded in darkness. But on this particular night, as the fog swirled and eddied through the narrow streets, a sense of unease hung heavy in the air. Sherlock and Watson had been summoned to the scene of a most gruesome crime, a murder that had shaken even the hardened denizens of London's criminal underworld. The victim was a prominent nobleman, a man of wealth and influence whose body had been discovered in a dark, fetid alleyway, his throat slashed and his eyes wide with terror. The scene was a tableau of horror, a nightmare made flesh, and even Sherlock, with his vast experience and ironclad composure, found himself momentarily taken aback by the sheer brutality of the act. As they approached the crime scene, the fog parting before them like a ghostly curtain, Sherlock's mind was already whirring with possibilities, his keen eyes darting from clue to clue with a rapidity that bordered on the inhuman. Watson, ever the faithful companion, followed close behind, his own medical expertise and keen powers of observation at the ready. But as they drew closer to the body, something strange and unsettling began to take shape. The evidence, at first glance so damning, seemed to point in an impossible direction, a direction that threatened to shatter the very foundations of Sherlock's world. For there, scattered among the blood and the gore, were clues that seemed to implicate none other than Sherlock himself. A scrap of fabric from his trademark coat, a strand of hair that matched his own, a footprint that bore an uncanny resemblance to the tread of his boots. Watson, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, turned to his friend with a look of utter bewilderment. "Sherlock," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion, "what is the meaning of this? Surely there must be some mistake." But Sherlock, his expression unreadable, merely shook his head. "I don't know, Watson," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the distant tolling of a church bell. "I truly do not know." As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the fog, casting an eerie, pallid light over the scene, Sherlock and Watson stood in silence, the weight of the impossible bearing down upon them. For the first time in his illustrious career, the great detective found himself at a loss, his brilliant mind unable to make sense of the evidence before him. Little did they know, as they stood there in the gathering light, that this was only the beginning of a mystery that would test the very limits of their friendship, a mystery that would force them to confront the darkest corners of the human soul and the fragility of even the most unassailable of truths. For Sherlock Holmes, the man who had built his life and his legend on the unshakable foundation of logic and reason, was about to embark on the most perilous journey of his career, a journey that would lead him to the very brink of madness and beyond, a journey from which he might never return. As the sun rose over the city, casting its pale, watery light over the grim tableau of death and deception, the game was afoot once more. But this time, the stakes were higher than ever before, and the outcome was far from certain. The fallen detective had begun his descent into the abyss, and only time would tell if he would emerge unscathed on the other side. Chapter 2: The Fugitive. The fog had not yet lifted from the dimly lit streets of London as Sherlock Holmes hurried through the shadows, his collar turned up against the chill. Behind him, the distant wail of a police siren pierced the night, a grim reminder of the charges that now hung over his head. Charges he knew, with every fiber of his being, to be false. Sherlock's mind raced, sifting through the evidence, searching for some glimmer of truth that could exonerate him. How could this have happened? How could the very clues that had once been the foundation of his brilliance now conspire to condemn him as a murderer? As he ducked into a narrow alleyway, the detective's thoughts turned to his loyal friend and companion, Dr. John Watson. The look of shock and disbelief on Watson's face had been seared into Sherlock's memory, a testament to the unbreakable bond they had forged over the years. Surely Watson could not believe him capable of such a heinous act. Yet Sherlock knew that the evidence was stacked against him, and the weight of that realization threatened to crush his spirit. If even Watson, his dearest friend, was forced to doubt his innocence, then how could he hope to convince the authorities of the truth? Pressing on through the fog, Sherlock made his way to a series of abandoned warehouses near the docks, a refuge known only to his most trusted network of informants. Here, he would be able to lay low, to gather his thoughts and formulate a plan to clear his name. As Sherlock slipped through the shadows, a movement in the distance caught his eye. Whirling around, he found himself face to face with a young woman, her eyes dark and defiant. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and urgent. "My name is Eliza Blackwood," the woman replied, her gaze unwavering. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Holmes." Sherlock's brow furrowed in confusion. "Expecting me? How could you possibly have known I would come here?" Eliza's lips curled into a wry smile. "Let's just say I have a keen interest in the affairs of London's most celebrated detective, and when I heard of the charges that have been leveled against you, I knew you would need help." Sherlock studied her for a moment, his mind racing. Eliza Blackwood, the name was familiar to him, though he couldn't quite place it. "You're the daughter of the slain nobleman, aren't you?" he murmured, realization dawning in his eyes. Eliza nodded, her expression hardening. "Yes, and I have no intention of letting my father's killer escape justice. Even if that means working with you, Mr. Holmes." Sherlock felt a pang of unease at her words. "And what makes you so certain that I am not the one who murdered your father?" "Because," Eliza said, stepping closer, "I know you, Sherlock Holmes. I've followed your work for years, and I know that you are a man driven by an unwavering sense of justice. The evidence may point to you, but I can see the truth in your eyes. You are being framed." Sherlock studied her for a long moment, weighing her words. There was a conviction in her gaze that he could not deny, a spark of intelligence and determination that reminded him so much of himself. Slowly, he inclined his head. "Then I suppose we have a common enemy, Miss Blackwood." Eliza's lips curled into a smile. "Indeed we do, Mr. Holmes, and I intend to see that justice is served, no matter the cost." In the days that followed, Sherlock and Eliza forged an uneasy alliance, their shared determination to uncover the truth binding them together in a way neither of them could have anticipated. Sherlock utilized his vast network of informants and contacts to gather information, while Eliza provided him with resources and connections that he had not even known existed. Together, they delved deeper into the case, uncovering a web of deception and corruption that stretched far beyond the murder of Eliza's father. Sherlock's brilliant mind was put to the test as he sifted through the evidence, searching for the elusive threads that would lead him to the true culprit. And yet, even as he pursued the investigation, Sherlock could not shake the growing sense of unease that had taken root within him. The more he uncovered, the more he began to doubt the certainty that had once been the foundation of his deductive prowess. What if the evidence truly did point to his own involvement in the crime? What if his legendary abilities had somehow been compromised, blinding him to a dark truth about himself? The thought was a bitter one, and it weighed heavily on Sherlock's mind as he and Eliza continued their clandestine investigations. They moved through the shadows, ever wary of the authorities who were no doubt scouring the city for the fugitive detective. Meanwhile, Sherlock's closest friend, Dr. John Watson, was grappling with his own inner turmoil. The loyal physician had been devastated by the charges leveled against Sherlock, his faith in the detective's innocence warring with the mounting evidence that seemed to condemn him. Watson knew that he should turn Sherlock in, that it was his duty as a citizen to uphold the law. And yet, The thought of betraying his dearest friend was like a knife to his heart. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Sherlock and Watson grew palpable. Sherlock knew that he could not continue to evade the authorities indefinitely, and he longed for the day when he could finally clear his name and be reunited with his faithful companion. But the weight of his own doubts, coupled with the ever-present threat of capture, threatened to crush his resolve. In the end, it was Eliza Blackwood who kept Sherlock's determination alive, her unwavering belief in his innocence a beacon in the darkness. Together, they would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. And when the final confrontation came, Sherlock knew that he would have to put everything on the line, his reputation, his freedom, and even his very soul, to prove his innocence and bring the real killer to justice. The game was afoot once more, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. Sherlock Holmes, the fallen detective, was about to embark on the most perilous journey of his life, one that would test the limits of his brilliant mind and the strength of his friendship with Dr. Watson. And as the fog continued to swirl through the streets of London, the fate of the city and the world hung in the balance.
Chapter 3. The Conspiracy Unravels. The fog had not yet lifted from the damp, cobblestone streets of London, casting an eerie, muted glow over the city. Within the confines of an abandoned warehouse near the docks, Sherlock Holmes and Eliza Blackwood huddled over a cluttered table, their eyes narrowed in concentration as they pored over the growing mountain of evidence. It had been weeks since Sherlock had been forced to go on the run, evading the relentless pursuit of Scotland Yard and the weight of the damning evidence that seemed to implicate him in the brutal murder of Eliza's father. Yet, despite the constant threat of capture, the detective's brilliant mind refused to be deterred. With Eliza as his unexpected ally, he was more determined than ever to uncover the truth and clear his name. The victim's estate was heavily in debt, Eliza murmured, her fingers tracing the lines of a ledger. And it appears there were a number of suspicious transactions in the weeks leading up to his death. Sherlock nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. Intriguing. And what of his business dealings? Any indication of shady partnerships or potential enemies? Eliza's lips thinned into a grim line. Unfortunately, yes. It seems my father was involved with a number of unsavory characters, individuals with ties to the city's criminal underworld. Sherlock's eyes narrowed. Then we may be onto something. The murder itself was a brutal, calculated affair, not the work of a common thug. This suggests a level of organization and resources that go beyond a simple robbery gone awry. Precisely, Eliza said, her gaze burning with determination. Which means the killer or killers must have had a motive beyond simple greed. They wanted my father dead, and they went to great lengths to frame you for the crime. Sherlock's fingers steepled under his chin, his mind racing. A conspiracy, then. One that reaches into the highest echelons of London society. He paused, his eyes flickering with a hint of unease. And one that may have somehow compromised my own abilities. Eliza watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. You still doubt yourself, don't you, Mr. Holmes? Sherlock let out a weary sigh. How can I not, when the evidence seems to point so clearly in my direction? What if my legendary deductive powers have been blinded by something or someone, if far more cunning and manipulative than I could have imagined? Then we shall have to uncover that truth, together, Eliza said, her voice laced with quiet determination. I may not fully understand the workings of your brilliant mind, but I know that you are innocent, and I will do whatever it takes to prove it. Sherlock studied her for a long moment, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. You are a remarkable woman, Miss Blackwood. I can see why my friend Watson was so quick to doubt my involvement in this case. Eliza's lips curled into a faint smile. Speaking of Dr. Watson, have you given any thought to reaching out to him? He may be the key to unraveling this conspiracy, if he can be persuaded to believe in your innocence. Sherlock's expression darkened. I fear that may be easier said than done. Watson has always been a man of unwavering principle, and the evidence against me is substantial. He paused, his jaw tightening. I cannot blame him if he has chosen to uphold the law over our friendship. Then perhaps it is time to change his mind, Eliza said, her eyes gleaming with determination. We must find a way to reach him, to show him the truth that lies beneath the surface of this case. Sherlock nodded slowly, his mind already whirring with possibilities. It will be a delicate operation, to be sure. Watson is a man of keen intellect and keen instincts. He will not be easily swayed. Then we must appeal to the deeper connection you share, Eliza said, her voice low and earnest. Remind him of the countless times you have stood by each other, of the bond that has weathered even the most perilous of storms. If anyone can convince him of your innocence, it is you, Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a small flame that threatened to burn away the shroud of doubt that had clouded his mind. Very well, Miss Blackwood. I shall reach out to Watson, and together we shall unravel this conspiracy, no matter the cost. In the days that followed, Sherlock and Eliza worked tirelessly, piecing together the intricate web of deceit and corruption that had been woven around them. They delved deeper into the victim's business dealings, uncovering a tangled web of shady partnerships and unsavory characters that stretched from the docks to the gilded halls of the nobility. As they uncovered layer after layer of the conspiracy, Sherlock found himself increasingly drawn into the shadows of his own past. Flashes of memory, a troubled childhood, a brilliant but troubled mind began to surface, hinting at the roots of the darkness that had always lurked at the edges of his consciousness. And through it all, the specter of Dr. Watson's doubt hung over them, a constant reminder of the fragility of their friendship and the high stakes that hung in the balance. Sherlock knew that he had to reach out to his old friend, to appeal to the bond they had forged over the years. But the weight of the evidence against him made the task a daunting one. Finally, after much deliberation, Sherlock dispatched a coded message to Watson, summoning him to a clandestine meeting in a dimly lit alley near the docks. As the fog swirled around them, the two friends came face to face, their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. "Watson," Sherlock began, his voice low and earnest. "I know the evidence against me is overwhelming, but you must believe me when I say that I am innocent." Watson's expression was a study in conflict, his brow furrowed with a mixture of anguish and determination. "The evidence doesn't lie, Sherlock. I've seen it with my own eyes. The clues that point directly to you. How can I ignore such damning proof?" Sherlock took a step forward, his eyes pleading. "Because you know me, Watson. You've seen the depths of my brilliance, the unwavering dedication I have to justice and truth. Surely, you cannot believe that I would stoop to such a heinous act." Watson's jaw tightened, and for a moment, Sherlock feared that his friend had made up his mind. But then, something shifted in Watson's eyes, a glimmer of the old trust and loyalty that had once bound them together. "I want to believe you, Sherlock," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "But the evidence is part of a larger conspiracy." Eliza's voice cut in, her figure emerging from the fog. "One that reaches into the highest echelons of London society. We have proof, Watson, proof that someone is framing Sherlock for this murder." Watson's gaze flickered between the two of them, his expression torn. "Then why have you not brought this evidence forward? Why are you hiding, Sherlock, if you are truly innocent?" Sherlock let out a heavy sigh. "Because, my dear Watson, the conspiracy runs deeper than either of us could have imagined. We are up against forces that will stop at nothing to ensure their secrets remain buried. And He paused, his eyes darkening. "I fear that my own past may hold the key to unraveling this mystery." The weight of Sherlock's words hung in the air, and for a long moment, The three of them stood in silence, the fog swirling around them like a living, breathing entity. Then, slowly, Watson's expression softened, and he reached out to clasp Sherlock's shoulder. "Then let us face this challenge together, my friend," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "For if anyone can uncover the truth and bring these conspirators to justice, it is you, Sherlock Holmes." Sherlock felt a surge of relief and gratitude wash over him, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lighten. With Watson by his side once more, he knew that they stood a chance of unraveling this conspiracy and clearing his name. The game was afoot once more, and this time, the stakes were higher than ever before. As Sherlock, Watson, and Eliza set off into the fog-shrouded streets of London, they knew that they were on the cusp of uncovering a truth that would shake the very foundations of the city they had sworn to protect. Chapter 4: The Darkest Hour. In the heart of the forsaken city, where shadows danced wickedly in the moonlight, a sinister aura of dread shrouded the cobblestone streets. Detective Alexander Wolfe, once hailed as the beacon of justice, now found himself ensnared in the suffocating grip of despair. Every footfall echoed like a lament, a reminder of the burdens he carried, the weight of his own failures, and the looming threat that besieged the city. With each passing moment, the darkness deepened, swallowing hope whole and leaving naught but despair in its wake. Yet amidst the suffocating gloom, a flicker of defiance burned within Wolfe's soul. It was a flame that refused to be extinguished, a beacon of light in the encroaching night. For he knew that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, he could not surrender to the shadows. With grim determination, he pressed forward, his senses alert for any sign of the malevolent force that lurked in the depths of the city. As the midnight hour approached, the city held its breath, teetering on the precipice of oblivion. And in the heart of the darkest hour, Detective Wolfe stood as the last bastion of hope, a solitary figure against the encroaching tide of darkness. As the shadows lengthened, Wolfe's footsteps echoed through the empty streets, each one a resolute defiance against the encroaching darkness. He knew that the time for action was now, that he could not afford to falter in the face of adversity. With every fiber of his being, he steeled himself for the trials that lay ahead, drawing upon the inner reserves of strength and courage that had sustained him through countless battles before. For though the night was long and the road ahead treacherous, he would not rest until the city was safe once more. With each step forward, Wolfe felt the weight of his burdens lift ever so slightly, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and determination. For in the heart of the darkest hour, he knew that hope still burned bright, a flickering flame that refused to be extinguished. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Detective Wolfe stood amidst the ruins of the city, his spirit unbroken and his resolve unwavering. For though the night had been long and the shadows deep, he had emerged victorious, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Chapter 5: The Reckoning. With the city teetering on the brink of collapse, Detective Wolfe embarked on a desperate quest for redemption. Through labyrinthine alleys and forgotten catacombs, he pursued the elusive truth, determined to unravel the tangled threads of conspiracy that threatened to tear the city asunder. But with each revelation came a new revelation, each layer of deceit more treacherous than the last. Betrayal lurked in every shadow, and allies proved as fickle as the shifting winds. Yet Wolfe refused to be swayed, his resolve unyielding in the face of adversity. For he knew that the time for reckoning had come, that the scales of justice must be balanced, no matter the cost. With steely determination, he confronted the enemies that lurked in the shadows, his every action a testament to his unwavering resolve. And as the fires of rebellion raged and the city trembled beneath the weight of its sins, Detective Wolfe emerged as a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. For though the road ahead was fraught with peril, he would not rest until justice was served and the reckoning was at hand. With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, the shadows deeper, and the dangers more pronounced. But Wolfe remained undeterred, his gaze fixed firmly on the horizon as he marched ever forward into the heart of the storm. As the city descended into chaos, Detective Wolfe found himself surrounded on all sides by enemies both seen and unseen. Yet amidst the chaos and confusion, a steely resolve burned bright within him, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. For he knew that though the road ahead would be fraught with peril, he would not rest until justice was served and the city was safe once more. And so, with courage as his guide and determination as his compass, he pressed on, ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. Chapter 6: The Darkest Secrets. In the depths of the city's underbelly, Detective Wolfe uncovered secrets that threatened to consume him whole. Betrayal and deceit intertwined like thorns, ensnaring him in a web of lies from which there seemed no escape. But amidst the chaos and despair, a glimmer of hope remained. For with each dark revelation, Wolfe drew closer to the truth, his resolve unshaken by the horrors he uncovered. Yet, as he delved deeper into the abyss, he realized that the truest secrets were those that lay buried within his own heart. Haunted by the ghosts of his past, he confronted his deepest fears and darkest desires, forging a path through the darkness with the light of his unwavering resolve. For he knew that only by facing the demons within could he hope to emerge from the shadows unscathed. And so, with courage as his guide and justice as his compass, Detective Wolfe pressed forward, his every step a testament to his indomitable will. As the city trembled on the brink of collapse, Detective Wolfe found himself ensnared in a web of lies and deceit that threatened to consume him whole. But amidst the chaos and despair, a flicker of hope remained, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. For he knew that, even in the darkest of times, there was always a glimmer of hope, a spark that refused to be extinguished. And so, with every ounce of strength left in his weary body, Wolfe braced himself for the trials that lay ahead, ready to confront whatever darkness awaited him. Chapter 7: The Betrayal. As the city descended into chaos, betrayal stalked Detective Wolfe at every turn. Friends became foes, and allies turned against him with a venomous fervor, their treachery cutting deeper than any blade. Yet amidst the sea of deceit, Wolfe refused to falter. For he knew that the truest betrayal was that which he inflicted upon himself, the doubts and fears that threatened to consume him whole. But even in the face of despair, a flicker of hope remained. For in the heart of the fallen detective, a fire burned bright, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. And so, with every ounce of strength left in his weary body, Wolfe braced himself for the final confrontation that awaited. For though the road ahead was fraught with peril, he would not rest until justice was served and the betrayers were brought to account. As the city burned and the forces of darkness closed in around him, Detective Wolfe stood poised on the precipice of oblivion, his resolve tested like never before. With every fiber of his being, he vowed to confront the looming threat head-on, to vanquish the shadows that threatened to consume him whole. But little did he know, the true test of his courage and his conviction had yet to come. For in the heart of the city's darkest hour, A revelation awaited that would shake the very foundations of his world. Chapter 8: The Final Confrontation. In the heart of the city, Detective Wolfe stood poised on the precipice of destiny, his resolve unyielding in the face of overwhelming odds. With each breath, he could feel the weight of his burdens pressing down upon him, threatening to crush him beneath their suffocating embrace. But amidst the chaos and the despair, a spark of hope ignited within Wolfe's soul. It was a flame that refused to be extinguished, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. With grim determination, he faced his greatest nemesis, his every movement a testament to his unwavering resolve. And as the final battle raged on, he fought not only for the city he had sworn to protect, but for the legacy of the fallen detective who had come before him. For in the end, it was not the strength of his fists or the sharpness of his wit that would determine his fate, but the depth of his conviction and the purity of his heart. Chapter 9: The Sacrifice. As the dust settled and the echoes of battle faded into silence, Detective Wolfe stood amidst the ruins of the city he had sworn to protect, his heart heavy with sorrow and regret. For though the forces of darkness had been vanquished, the cost of victory had been steep. Friends had fallen, sacrifices had been made, and the scars of the conflict would linger for generations to come. And yet, amidst the devastation, there remained a glimmer of hope, a flicker of light in the darkness. For in the heart of the fallen detective, Wolfe found the strength to carry on, to rebuild what had been lost, and to forge a new future from the ashes of the old. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with peril, he knew that he would not walk it alone. For the legacy of the fallen detective lived on in the hearts of those who had been touched by his courage and his sacrifice. And though his journey had been fraught with darkness and despair, his legacy would endure, a beacon of hope in the encroaching night. Chapter 10: The Fallen Detective's Legacy. As the sun rose on a new day, Detective Wolfe stood amidst the ruins of the city he had sworn to protect, his heart heavy with the weight of his burdens. Yet amidst the ashes of the old world, a new dawn was breaking, heralding the birth of a new era. For though the fallen detective had passed into legend, his legacy lived on in the hearts of those who had been touched by his courage and his sacrifice. And as the city began to rebuild, his memory served as a guiding light, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. Through the trials and tribulations of the past, Detective Wolfe had forged a path of righteousness, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. And though his journey had been fraught with darkness and despair, his legacy would endure, a shining example of the power of hope and redemption. For in the end, it was not the battles he fought or the enemies he vanquished that